Hello and welcome to what might become a series of videos. You've been lied to. You've been lied to on a massive scale since you were born, to a degree that is really difficult to understand. So I did a video a while back, sort of beginning of the year, called Moon Nazis, which, didn't get as many views, probably because people just assumed it was, facetious or a joke or something. But there's a lot of history that I packed into that video. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, I suggest take a look at it. But let me just give you a very brief overview of some things that I'm not going to ask you to take my word for it. I want you to go and investigate it for yourself and check it out, right? Check it out. Don't take what I'm saying as being true. Investigate it for yourself. Try and prove me wrong, right? Just as what I spoke about in the Moon Nazis video was part one of the Moon Nazi theory, and I don't know when I'll get to part two, but part one is the really more important one, which was how the Nazis were the first people to really get a handle on propaganda and essentially brainwash the planet into believing certain things. And we can see the results of that now in many spheres of life. And my contention is that, as far as the whole Nazi thing goes, the Nazis didn't really lose the war. They lost it militarily, but psychologically, they essentially won. They had a huge effect, particularly on American culture. And American culture is being, spread throughout the world by, things like Hollywood. And let me just fix this a little bit. There you go. Hollywood films and TVs and films and so on. A lot of them originate from America, and they all have this narrative, this underlying narrative that simply just assumes that we all agree that this is good and that is bad and so on. And it's it's really difficult. It's like being a fish. You're born in water. That's all you know. If somebody starts to tell you that there's this huge current and that there's ice and there's a huge ball of fire hanging in the sky that allows you to live as a fish in water, you're just going to feel this is madness. This is an insanity. I mean, imagine, if you didn't see it every day when you stepped out, who would imagine the sun? Who could imagine that? A giant ball of fire just hanging in the sky on which we spin around and allows us to be alive. It's absurd. It's insane. It's weird, right? But that's the thing. If you're born into it, if that's all you know as you grow up, you can't get out of it. It's really difficult to break out of this thing. Now, I was kind of weirdly lucky in that kind of got Asperger's, I've got a high IQ, and I had a really weird life. My childhood was very different from everybody else's. I had to continually, I'm gonna be 50 in a few months, and I've moved 52 times, and I've lived in different countries. I got moved around and had to adapt to so many different things that I somewhere along the line, and because I'm Asperger's, so I'm quite focused on the truth, on reality, on objective facts, because it's going to be more difficult for you to sway me with emotions, unless you're a pretty girl, and that's why I've been divorced twice. But, the point is, it's really difficult to break out of it. So I just want in this video to give you a few pointers, drop a little ideas, and you go and look them up. And I'll start out with some really simple stuff. So this is Herodotus, the histories of Herodotus. Now in here, Herodotus talks about the pyramids. And Herodotus was further away from when the pyramids were actually supposedly built than we are from Herodotus today. So he described a few things about the pyramids, and he described how there was a huge lake under the pyramid and a burial ground under it, and those other stuff related to it, which people just assumed was a lot of nonsense, just like they assumed that the Iliad was myth. you know, and it took a German guy reading the Iliad and going out there and looking for it and finding Troy, finding the original Ilium. And what a lot of people still don't know, you can go and visit Troy now, or Ilium as it was called in the Iliad. And it's there, it's a city, it clearly was a large city. It's a little bit different now because the seashore has moved since that time. But you can definitely see, you know, I went sort of cheated a little bit because, you know, it's Turkey and they're not really going to beat you over the head and arrest you if you go over the line a little bit, and there's nobody watching anyway. So I went to what was the extent, the limit of the city wall. And if you stand there, you can definitely see the fields of battle would be below. And, you know, the descriptions in the Iliad, if you've read the Iliad, and you go and visit Troy, you can tell that that's the place. But one thing that nobody mentions, which I found astonishing, and there's pictures of this on my blog, is the sort of subterranean passage which Odysseus used to sneak his way into the city and steal the statuette of the goddess, which is why, you know, supposedly the Trojans lost the war, because they had lost favor with their goddess, and so the Greeks with their horse managed to get in and destroy them. The thing is, that passage exists, you know, and it also explains how the Trojans could be sieged for so long and yet still have access to fresh water, because the passage is there, it exists, it's locked off the grid, but I don't know, most people don't even talk about it. It's so weird to me, even in the descriptions of the city, that when you're there, they don't really mention it. But I walked around and I tried to figure out where things were, and I found it, and it's like, well, wait a minute, what is that? And just a little plaque there, you know, hidden behind a bush, and there's this grill locking off the corridor, but you can see far away enough into it that you can tell it. You know, and I think in the description as well, it states, you know, it goes all the way back into the city. So it's really interesting. So the stuff that was written as myth and people didn't understand, you know, this is the histories of Herodotus, turns out they're kind of real. Now you're talking, well, what about, you know, this lake under the pyramid in Egypt, the Great Pyramid, that's a lot of rubbish. Well, no, not really. There's a bunch of stuff under the pyramids that we're still not being told about, and under the Sphinx, thanks to the guy who's in charge of the Giza Plateau is Zawi How-Ass. Yeah, that's his name, How-Ass. Yeah, it might be spelled a bit different, but the pronunciation, just trust me on this, it's Zawi How-Ass. That's his name, and he's locked up stuff that's under the Sphinx. This is not conjecture, it's not my opinion. I had dinner with a guy who did the seismographic tests that proved there's a chamber under the Sphinx that we don't know about. We haven't been allowed to go in there, and there's metal in there, large chunks of metal. So we don't know what's in there because Zawi How-Ass has bricked it up, has blocked it off. It's not allowed anybody to go in it. And the last time I was in Egypt, I took pictures of them bricking up the sides of the Sphinx where the initial hole was in, where Zawi How-Ass has been in there, but he hasn't allowed anybody else to go in there. So, and you think, well, you know, surely, well, no, because a few years ago, some British guy, working from his study at home, reading maps, old maps that are copies of old maps from the British Museum, discovered, hey, but there should be a well here, and there should be a thing there. And one of his friends that were out in Egypt discovered this whole tunnel, this whole huge underground cavern of connecting tunnels in Egypt, and they filmed some of it. I forget the names of these things because, you know, I read so much of this stuff, and I've sort of stopped taking notes on it because I figured out what's going on. I never figured this stuff out for anybody else, really, mostly for myself. I wrote a book about it, whatever. I write a book here and there now and then, but it's mostly just to satisfy my own curiosity, really. And you know, a lot of the rabbit holes I go down become dead ends because I don't try and fit any theory to my particular. I don't have a specific pet theory. You know, I just go and look down a rabbit hole and then go and look down another rabbit hole, and that's quite a few people that are quite smart will do that because we get bored. You know, we can think three things at once, where everybody else just thinks one, and we think at 3 times the speed that most people think. So we get bored and we start to look at weird stuff, and then we find, hey, well, and then sometimes these things connect and you put it together. and you find out some very interesting things. Another quite interesting book is this, Dark Side of the Moon, and it's the sort of a little bit more of the true story of Werner von Braun, and the fact that Werner von Braun was a full-on Nazi. Now, there's another interesting book that I've got, I just don't have it here with me, but that was written by Werner von Braun, a fiction book written by Werner von Braun, stating how we could go to Mars. And we still haven't gone to Mars. The moon, we have gone to the moon, but pretty much almost all of the footage of the moon is fake. And we didn't go to the moon the way that we say we went to the moon, but I've made a couple of videos on this. So if you're interested in that, go look at that up. But you think you know history, right? And I'm just sort of setting you up a little bit and giving you little snippets of 2 or 3 things. This is it's a book in Italian. It was a gift from a friend of mine from Kazakhstan. We went when we were in Venice. She's also a business partner of mine now and then when anything sort of happens, which hasn't for a while. But anyway, this is written in Italian, but it's called The Treasures of San Lazzaro of the Armenians. Their Armenians, as you probably don't know, were almost exterminated. There was the Armenian genocide. Isn't talked about because they were Christians. And in one of the little islands of the island of San Lazzaro, which is near, it's one of the islands in Venice, there is the Armenian sort of sanctuary that was there, and they had a lot of very interesting documents, very interesting stuff. And in a sense, it was a little bit of a repository of Christian culture, just like the Irish. I love the way Owen Benjamin says that the Mexicans are a little bit like brown Irish people because they get drunk, they're Catholics, they have lots of kids, they fight, and and it's kind of true, But the interesting thing is that real Catholics, old school Catholics, the Irish, kept a lot of the treasures of Christendom hidden for years in very inhospitable, crappy little islands where it only rains and snows, and you just pain the whole time that you're there, wet pain, I think, cold, and they only brought these things out when it was sort of safe to do so again. So you don't know the real history. Now here's one that is particularly, if you start to talk about religion or economics, people just glaze over, right? Because wake up, it's important shit. How money works, and whether there is a God or what God or how that works, or even if they're just using it to manipulate you, yeah? It's important. So here's a little tidbit for you, which if you're the average person watching this video, you're gonna think the same way I thought most of my life, yeah? Which is Christianity is insane. It's a crazy idea. Only an idiot could believe it. And why? Because what you're being told about it, the lies that you've been taught about what Christianity is, are massive, massive. You look at Bergoglio, you look at the Vatican, you look at all the pedophiles running rampant in that place. I mean, they literally have homosexual orgies fueled by cocaine in the Vatican. Okay, this is like the number 2 guy in the Vatican is caught red-handed with like cocaine and having gay orgies inside the Vatican. They have gay orgies, have sex on the altar in the Sistine Chapel. That's the level of depravity that is going on there. And any sane person looks at that and looks at me and says, wait a minute, and you got baptized 2 years ago, not even quite 2 years ago, as a Catholic? What, are you insane? And I would have been the first to say that. But the thing is, I did a lot of research before I got baptized. I started reading this stuff when I had my Road to Damascus moment. I read obsessively, and you got to understand that when I start to look at something obsessively, I mean, someone that was very important to me had a brain tumor, and I spent 6 months online researching stuff. By the end of that 6 months, I can now converse with the top medical professionals that deal with brain tumors, and I can talk at their level. And I knew exactly that there was really only one drug that would help this lady, and the only 2 companies manufacture it, only one company exports it. So and that that drug probably gave her the chance to live longer and have a child. Unfortunately, you know, she's passed on now, and I don't really want to discuss the details of that, but she at least had a chance to have a child who probably won't remember her, but is wouldn't have existed if not possibly for that drug. And you know, all I'm saying about this, I'm not trying to make myself out to be a hero or whatever. It's just, the thing is, I have a very good ability to synthesize a lot of information very quickly at a very high level. And I read into Christianity for like 4 years before I even thought of getting baptized. And I know that what people think is the Catholic Church isn't the Catholic Church. So I've just made videos about that as well. But let's just skip over that for a second. Let me just give you the history in summary form of what Western civilization is and where it came from and what you've been told, and compare these two things. They're really different. Now, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that the civilization of the West, Western civilization, Christendom, is the best system of humanity, of living, that humans have put together in the entire history of the human race. Which is why everybody wants to live in Christendom. We made, you know, Europe became so good and so nice a place to live in that everybody else wanted to live in there now. And then by extension, America, Australia, New Zealand, to some extent, until not too long ago as well, South Africa. And I'm not talking about apartheid, that wasn't a good thing, but I'm saying, you know, the fact is that whenever Western man went, which, you know, people try and reduce to, oh, white people, it's not that, it's Christendom. Christendom created the best form of government, the best form for human beings on the planet. And why? Because the key point of Christianity is the other human being, the other person. It's a human thing. It's about individuals. It's not about massive movements and whatever. And that's the thing. So here's a piece of information for you. If you think you know what Christianity is, and you're under 70 years old, you don't. You have not got a clue, all right? And this is very hard for a lot of Christians to accept, or people who call themselves Christians. Churchians. Most so-called Christians are churchians. If you are under 70 years old, you have never attended a proper mass. An actual mass, you've not attended it. Because, let me first define what I mean by Christianity. Christianity is what brought us, what they call the Dark Ages. We're not the Dark Ages, that was the Renaissance. The term the Dark Ages got coined by the so-called Enlightenment. Now, the Enlightenment were mass murdering freaks who speared babies and burnt women and children alive, in the French Revolutionary Wars. They destroyed human beings. They were trying to wipe out religion. That was the Enlightenment. And they referred to Christianity as the Dark Ages. But let me tell you what Christianity created. Christianity was the first and only religion that professed the equality of human beings. And by equality of human beings, we mean at a spiritual level. At no point did Christianity ever say men and women are equal and blacks, whites, and greens are all the same. No. We all have equal value in God's eyes. Your soul, my soul, the soul of, a black, transgender, lesbian person is just as valid as my soul in God's eyes, maybe more for reasons beyond my ability to comprehend. That does not mean that we're the same. Okay, I'm 6'2", and I can do certain things that a person that is 5'6" just can't do, all right? I'm a man, and that means there's a whole bunch of things I can do that a woman just cannot do. And there's a whole bunch of things that women can do that I can't do. I can't make kids, I can't breastfeed them. Doesn't matter what I'm gonna want, I could never do that, So doesn't mean equal does not mean equal in the world. It means we all have potentially equal value. And even that's just potential, because if you're a piece of shit that goes around murdering, raping little kids, you don't have the same value as me. And as far as I'm concerned, you don't have the same right to life as I do. And we recognize that even in our current fallen state, in laws and systems of justice and so on. But Christendom, Christianity, created the first movement of equality towards humanity, of treating people in a humane way, of law, of justice, of beauty, of truth. Look at the creations of the cathedrals that were built, the paintings that were made. Science was invented by Catholics. The scientific method, the methodology of discovering information in a scientific way that is repeatable experiments, recording the information, gathering the data, that was done for the vast majority of it by Catholic monks. It was Christianity that brought reason, the whole concept of Christianity, not as you've been taught it, but real Christianity, real Catholicism teaches reason. The difference between us and animals is we have the ability to reason, and we should use our reason to control our emotions and direct them in the correct way, in a way that is loving, that treats others as you wish to be treated, and so on and so forth. So, and you know, you think, oh, well, I don't believe in transubstantiation. Doesn't matter. The point is, it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. We're not talking about your specific little belief. You're not that important, all right? You're just one little guy and a bunch of things. Let me explain something here. Look at the big picture. Forget your binary thinking, little atheist, autistic way of thinking. Look at the big picture. Whether you believe it or not is irrelevant, okay? When I wrote The Face on Mars, I was not a Christian by any way, shape, or form. I was basically a Zen agnostic that spent 6 days a week punching people and walls and each other and training like an obsessed person, yeah? Even then, I was a borderline, you know, I was agnostic, borderline atheist type guy. I wasn't atheist purely because of science, because I read enough science, I knew enough about biology, physics, and astronomy to know that the maths didn't make sense. There had to be a directive intelligence behind all this stuff, because by chance, it doesn't work. The maths just doesn't add up. By orders of magnitude, that might as well be absolute, you know? So the point is, even then, I knew there's got to be some directing intelligence into all this. But even then, I recognized the utility of Christendom, of Christianity, because it allowed to create the environment that would allow human beings to be treated in a more humane way. I mean, if you look at, you know, these guys that are live action role playing at being pagans, you know, and I believe in Thor and Odin. No, you fucking don't. No, you don't. Do you have any idea? And I've got friends, I've got a good friend, hi David. I've got a good friend that, you know, he's pretty much into this stuff, and his brother too, and he's sort of like, you know, I'm a northerner, I like the winter, and, you know, I relate more to the Viking pagans. Yeah. Okay, buddy. Do you know what happened at the funeral pyres of those people? Yeah? Look into it. Look into it, what happened at the funeral of the average Viking. Look at the rape and murder that went on just at a funeral. Trust me, you don't believe that shit. No one actually believes in Thor, all right? No one believes in Odin, yeah? You're not gonna fucking let yourself get killed before you renege on Odin. But just recently, and in the Middle East, it's happening daily, there are Christians that will rather get shot or be beheaded than renounce their Lord Jesus Christ. You're not going to do that for, you know, Freya. Trust me, you're not. And these people are not insane, they're not crazy. You know, some of them are kids. 15-year-old kids got killed by ISIS fuckers for not renouncing Jesus Christ. You know, that's real. That's whichever way you look at it, it has an effect, right? And that effect was essentially positive. It's a pretty good book called Bearing False Witness. Funnily enough, not written by a Catholic, that demystifies a lot of the mythology, a lot of the lies that have been spread about Catholicism. But let me keep it as quick and short as I can because I'm already at a almost half-hour mark, and I was trying to make it like a 10-minute thing. I end up in this little rant. The thing is, if you think you know what Christianity is, you don't. You've got no clue. Because unless you're 80 years old, you've probably never attended a proper mass. I say, well, what does it matter? Well, it does matter. Because along with going to mass and along with being there and understanding what's going on in that mass and understanding what's behind all the ritual and the tradition of that, a lot of other things follow. Keep this in mind. Imagine for a moment, right? If you're an atheist, you're a pagan, you're agnostic, whatever. Imagine for a moment that everybody that's died is still there somehow. Imagine that they could all watch over you. They can all see you. They can all see what's going on. Do you think that it wouldn't matter to you as much what your history is? Do you think that you wouldn't want to know, like, but who was my great-grandfather? Or who was my grandfather? Never mind my great-grandfather, you know? And if you believe that, you know, these ancestors are there, they're like saints, they're either in heaven looking at you or waiting for you, or, you know, that would change your outlook on life. That would change the way you think about things. That would change how you act. That would change the way you carry your name. Even if, you know, you were the product of, I don't know, some horrific shit. Let's say you were the product of incest and you were raped by your own parents and, you know, some horrible shit happened to you. Yeah, that can all happen to you, but you would still have pride in yourself that you've survived through that, and you worked yourself out of that. And where did you come from? What's the line of people that you came from? And let's say it's all bad, you know, and nobody's got all bad, right? Everybody's got slaves and everybody's got kings in their ancestry. But let's say it was mostly bad. So what? At least you know, shit, my people were like pirates and rapists and murderers. We were all bad seed. Fucking hell, you know? It's on me now to change that path for my kids and their kids. And let them know, listen, you come from a bad line, so be careful, you know, go the right way. Go to church every week, you know, or whatever, you know, and, then there's overcorrection and whatever, you know, there's a whole bunch of other psychological stuff. But the point is, if you think you know what Christianity is, you don't. You've got no clue, because Christianity has been absolutely converged, even in the mainstream, you know, like Catholicism, for about over 70, from 1958 on, it's been completely overrun. So from before that, and if you read the encyclicals of the popes and so on, it'll show you that they knew it was coming. They were like, we got to be careful, we got to watch out, we got to keep these guys out because they're infiltrating and they're turning things upside down. And the point of that is that history matters. History matters a lot, because if you don't know your history and if you don't know the truth, you're just going to accept whatever you're fed. You know, if when you're a little kid you're told that the moon is made of cheese, you're going to believe that. And then when some guy comes up and says, actually, you know, it's a planet, it's got mountains on it, just look through this, you wouldn't even look through the telescope to see that it's got mountains and it moves, which, you know, you can do with even a shitty telescope will show you that. But you won't even believe enough to take the time to look through the telescope, because you'll believe the moon is made of cheese, and only a crazy person doesn't know that. It's really, really important. And I would suggest to you that you should maybe look up into Christianity, because a lot of people think, oh, Christianity, to turn the other cheek, what a weak, pussified religion, because everything's already going to shit, and now you're telling me I have to accept even more of this crap. No, that's not Christianity, that's churchanity. Christianity is the Crusades. Christianity is people selling everything they own, buying armor and weapons, and walking to Jerusalem and kicking the Saracens' ass all the way until they get to Jerusalem and take it back. That's Christianity. The Knights of Malta that repelled the siege in the 1500s, that's Christianity. You know, Levalette was 82 years old and fought on the walls for like half the day, wounded in a leg, in full armor, so that his men wouldn't get demoralized. That's a man, that's a Christian, that's a Catholic. So, you know, when you look at Catholicism today and you say, well, you know, they're full of pedophiles and they're sick fucks, I agree with you. As far as I'm concerned, you know, like pedophiles should be burnt at the stake. You know, pedophile priests especially, you know, these guys are just scum of the earth. It's my opinion that, you know, I'm not advocating that you go and do it. Okay, just, you know, legal reasons. I'm not advocating violence. I'm just telling you my opinion is a priest that rapes little kids, as far as I'm concerned, is stealing oxygen. And there's a lot more useful things that can use oxygen, like moss. Reindeers eat moss. It has a use. So, and if you want to understand a little bit of, very briefly, the history of Christianity, just imagine how crazy is it? How crazy is it that Christianity even exists? I mean, it started from 11 scared guys. 11 scared guys who none of them believed in their Messiah enough to get nailed to a cross next to him. Only one guy, Thomas, said we should go there and die next to him. And he's the only one that said it. He still didn't do it. We don't know exactly why, but chances are he probably didn't want to get nailed to a cross. And Peter, who was the leader of the apostles, reneged his Lord 3 times before sunrise. And he was supposed to be the leader. And then Paul still had to go and correct the guy. These were flawed human beings. But now, the interesting thing is that every one of these guys, every one of these 11, with the possible exception of one of them, but almost all of them for sure, at least 10 of them, went from not being willing to, die next to Jesus when he was here on earth, to being martyred. St. Peter had himself crucified upside down because he said, I'm not worthy to be crucified in the way that my Lord was. And he lasted a couple of days because of it. Because the thing that kills you when you're crucified is you eventually choke out, because you can't hold yourself up anymore, and eventually you suffocate. So it's a horrific way to go, but it doesn't take you 2 days to die. But if you're upside down, you can still breathe. So he lasted, and he was a big guy apparently, so he lasted a longer time. And this was a guy who was so scared he wouldn't even admit that he knew Jesus at the crucifixion. What changes a man to do that? What could possibly make someone do that? The resurrection. Because if you did see Jesus come back, and again, Thomas, my favorite apostle, he wasn't there when they first saw Jesus, and they all told him, hey, he's back, he rose from the dead. And he's like, you guys are all high, you're fucking drunk, what are you smoking, you fuckers? I don't believe that shit unless I put my fingers in his wounds. And the next time Jesus comes along and says, here you go, put your hand in, and he's like, oh shit. So that would explain it, right? But if you're brought up in a classical way, you can't imagine the resurrection. And I agree with you, I'm with you. Because I couldn't believe that for decades. It's like, well, it can't be real. I don't believe it. The fact is that I've had some experiences that I'm not going to talk about that are at least as weird as the resurrection. And I'm not crazy. I've never done drugs. But I've had some things happen that I can only describe as miraculous. At least twice in my life, I was saved by a vision. Literally, I'd be dead if I didn't have a vision, what you call a vision. And I described a couple of these in a book that I wrote about Systema. But, you can explain that because there is such a thing as premonitions, and they've done meta-studies on precognition, and it's a real thing that human beings can do. So you could explain it that way. But I've had other things happen, that they're absurd, and I cannot explain it to anybody. I can't even discuss it in a rational way, that unless you have had something similar happen to you, you won't know what the hell I'm talking about. But now here's the interesting thing. I put it to you that every single person watching this, if they think about it for a minute, they'll realize they've had some supernatural event happen. And if you're a skeptic like me, you'll question it till the end of the earth, and you'll go, well, this could have been that. And, but the fact is, we've all had these things happen. So what you have to admit is what C.S. Lewis wrote, which is, if Jesus was not who he said he was, then we're all idiots. But if Jesus was who he said he was, then it all makes sense. And the same thing, if the resurrection is real, then Christianity is real. The interesting thing is that if you actually look at what Christianity is, it makes sense, it fits. it predicts even reality, because it is based on reality. So we had this Christendom, which created, you know, the best system of life for humans that we've had ever on Earth. Then along came the, you know, Enlightenment, the so-called French Revolution, and then came Protestantism, which is the devil's way of screwing things up, which is, you know, the thing about evil is that it's rarely massively in your face. You know, evil is not really the Nazi with the swastika coming to your house to like burn you alive, or the jihadi with a bomb that's just gonna blow himself up in your house. That shit happens too, but that's not really how evil really works. Evil is insidious, you know, and it's like you don't even notice you're doing it. You know, it's like it leads you down this path, and Protestantism was one of those. It corrupted the church, and what did it do? What did you get after Protestantism? Now all the Protestants are freaking out, but you know, bide your time, use your reason, right? If you're a Christian, use your reason, control your emotions. Bear with me. I was one of the guys that used to say Christianity was total nonsense. So if you're a Protestant, just shut your mouth and just listen up. You had this creation of human benefit for the most part, certainly an improvement on whatever was there before for 1,500 years, and reached its peak. And then you got Protestantism that all of a sudden, what was the main aim of Protestantism? Anybody? Huh? Divorce. Catholic Church and even the Orthodox really don't, until later, don't allow divorce. Divorce is anathema, right? But the Protestants, that was the whole point of Protestantism, so that Henry VIII could divorce and Luther could bang nuns. That's what it was. You know, it's a sex thing. And there's your hint. As soon as you sexual depravity, and there you go. And you know, sex, lust, that sort of thing is very powerful. So it's very strong, very easy to redirect people using that. So you create this alternative false religion called Protestantism, which then splits into 30,000 denominations, currently probably 40,000. Those are real numbers. And what happens? Then after Protestantism, you've got divorce, right? So now you can divorce. So sex went from creating a family, having children, the family, the nucleus of reality, the most human thing ever, because you care about the people that you create, your children, and the woman that you're with or the man you're with, and it becomes a family. The family unit starts to get degraded because now divorce is okay. Oh, well, I don't really like you. I'm a bit bored of her. Oh, well, it doesn't matter if I got kids. I can go with a prettier woman or a younger one or a, you know, whatever, or a richer man and now you've got divorce. And then a little bit later, you get the Industrial Revolution. Where did the Industrial Revolution happen? Well, in England, right? It was the British that really started the Industrial Revolution. And what was the Industrial Revolution? Because look at the change, right? You went from marriage, that's it, you get married, you're it, that's it, for life, forever, done. You went from that to, well, if I don't like it, I can change it. So from the family, which is external to you, it's outside of you, it's something you sacrifice yourself for, it's about you, your happiness. I just want to be happy, right? The refrain of the average woman nowadays, I just want to be happy. The refrain of everybody, I just want to be happy. That's fucking idiotic. Your purpose on earth is not to be happy. Your purpose on earth is to do good, is to be good. You're fighting behind enemy lines. What, you think you're in war behind enemy lines? Your purpose is to be happy? No. Your purpose is to complete the mission. Your purpose is to win. Your purpose is to kick ass of the enemy. Your purpose is to provide support to your guys that are behind the lines in jail, make them escape, free them. That's what Christianity is. It's a war. It's not for you to be happy, you know, and that doesn't, the amazing thing is, the more you do Christianity, the happier you are, the happier you become, because that's what the truth is. I didn't know this, you know, I've been a pretty successful guy in my life in many areas, many fields. I've done a lot of weird stuff, crazy things, always succeeded pretty much at pretty much everything I put my mind to in one way or another. And yet, real happiness only started to come about after I became a Christian in my heart first, and then I got baptized, and you know, things can only get better. It's weird, you know, and I get more attacks now than I did then, from spiritual attacks and so on, physical attacks, but I'm happier than I've ever been. And that's the thing. So from the original Christianity, which is you get married and that's it, and you're for your family, you get married to create a family and to build something, it went to now it's your happiness. You have to be with the right person, and if it's not the right person, you can change. So what does that mean? That means it's about me. Then you get the Industrial Revolution. What's the Industrial Revolution? Oh, well, let's just mechanize people. It doesn't matter if, if these kids that are like 9 years old got to work 15 hours in a fucking mine, or like Owen Benjamin's granddad, right? It was a 7-fingered lead miner who died of black lung. It doesn't matter, because I can make more money. And if I can just mechanize all these people, and you mechanize human beings, which is the opposite of Christianity. It's the opposite of Christianity. And then a little bit after that, you get contraception, because, well, it's not just about marriage. You can change the person you don't like, but how do you really know unless, you bang 50 of them and then you pick one that you kind of like, and then if you don't like her, you can still change her anyways. And contraception. What's the next thing? Well, you don't have to stay married to anybody now if you're not happy. In fact, you don't even have to have a family. You don't have to make kids with them. You just bang them because you got contraception. And well, if the contraception fails, well, abortion. That's the next step. Okay? We've got this fucking cretin, Alyssa Milano, put a tweet out. Alyssa Milano is a fucking moron. Okay? She's got the brain cell of I don't know, a fucking newt on cocaine. That's on crack. And that's an insult to newts, so I'm sorry for the reptiles. Alyssa Milano just put out a tweet saying that women should withhold sex until they can have the right to have abortions. So I'm like, you go, Alyssa. That's it. That's it. No one ever stick your dick in Alyssa Milano ever again, or anyone like her. So what are you saying here? Let's follow the logic, right? You are going to boycott men by withholding your sex, which thank God, because honestly, any sane man would not want to put his dick in that. But you're going to withhold sex until you have the right to kill babies, which can only happen if you have sex in the first place. So basically what you're saying is that you just want to kill babies. That's your whole purpose of existing. Because, oh no, a woman should have the right to kill her child. And unless I can kill my child, I'm not going to have sex. I'm like, yeah, we're all cool with that. You don't have sex, you don't have the baby, you don't have to kill it. So, yay. It's not fucking rocket science, right? It's not hard. What makes babies? Sticking your dick in it. You don't want to have a baby? Don't stick your dick in it. Yeah. And again, I'm not preaching, because people that know my history, and it's out in books and stuff, I'm the last guy that can preach purity. But, that's the thing. Evolve, grow, learn. So you've gone from the best system of life for human beings to this corruption that starts with Protestantism, moves on to the Industrial Revolution, moves on to contraception, abortion, and the falling apart, the infiltration of the Catholic Church by predatory pedophiles, and it all collapses and it all becomes gray ooze. And so nobody believes anything anymore, and you get the current state of affairs, which is a collapsing post-Christian era. So my, let's say, challenge to you is first learn the history, the real history. And you know what, if you don't want to learn about Christian history or Christianity, that's fine. Pick something else, whatever. Pick the moon landings, there you go. Find out about that. Find out why every single moon rock is fake. It's kind of weird, right? The moon rock that the astronauts gave to the Dutch Prime Minister is fake. It's petrified trees. It's kind of weird. So just find out about history and your history. And it's a good thing to find out about your personal history too. There you go. I've just been putting these together now. That is my great-grandfather, my paternal, that's the dad of my grandmother from my father's side. He was a general. He started out as a 13-year-old deckhand because he ran away from home so many times. His father said, what the hell do you want to do? Why you keep running away? He said, no, I want to be a deckhand on a ship. So his dad took him to the port, put him on a ship, told the captain, look after him. He eventually became a general. He was in the Boxer War. He could speak Mandarin Chinese. And a very interesting guy. And it's weirdly enough, I found out only a few years ago when I did a bit of research on it, that my family is generally, that's what we've been. We've been sort of mercenaries, and we fought in wars and traveled and explored. So it was sort of building, construction, and destroying war. You know, we fought wars for other people, for ourselves. We got royal titles from liberating certain areas of Italy and so on. It's kind of interesting. So know your own history, and I strongly suggest to you that you learn about the history of Christianity. It's really interesting. It's you know, I used to think it was the most boring stuff. It's really not. How did 11 scared guys conquer the world, pretty much, in terms of ideology? At least up until about 1500s, certainly. And even, you know, it took a while for the Protestant corruption to sort of destroy things, to the point where, you know, now the Catholic, the fake Catholic Church, what I call the Novus Ordo, you know, they're the new orcs. Novus Ordo, not Ordo, you know, new order. There's no such new order, you know. New world order, new order, yeah. Globalists, homo-globalists. It's the Novus Ordo Church is fake, you know, it's absolutely fake. It's pretending to be the Catholic Church, and they have stolen, you know, because they've infiltrated in a clever, let's say, evil way. They've taken over all the material possession of the Catholic Church, but they're still real Catholics, and it's very easy to find out who it is. If you don't publicly renounce, deny, and reject everything connected to Vatican II, you're not a Catholic. It's as simple as that. And if you're a cleric, purporting to be a cleric of the Catholic Church, and you don't reject everything connected to Vatican II, you are not a Catholic. That's not my opinion. That's canon law of the Catholic Church. I've made videos on it. You can look at that. I strongly suggest you look up Christianity, the history of Christianity, and what the Gnostics have tried to do from the beginning, right from the start, how they've tried to pervert the truth right from the beginning, and how a lot of these Gnostic heresies are happening now, you know, and it's the same heresies. They just keep coming up again and again and again. And keep in mind, you know, for those of you that are atheists, that atheists have killed over 100 million people in the last 80 years. All the wars, all the religious wars that ever happened, all put together, do not amount, they amount roughly, all the religious wars that ever happened on earth from the beginning of time that we have any record for, account for only about 7% of the total wars that have ever occurred. And about half of those are due to Muslims, due to Islam. Because Islam is a religion of war, and expands only through the sword and war. And that's how it, you know, Islam didn't exist until after about 700 years after Christianity. And what is now currently Islamic countries all used to be Christian, and they got taken over by mass murder, rape, and pillage. You know, that's what happened. Again, that's factual history. You know, it's just the reality of what happened. So look, I would suggest you look into the history of the Crusades, look at the history of the Siege of Malta, look at the history of Christianity, and that will give you a feel for what Christians are, real Christians, what they are. And it'll help you to differentiate between Christians and churchians. And that will change your zeitgeist. Once you start to look at Christianity that way, you might even also then start to understand the nature of evil, which is a very interesting thing, because, you know, part of the reason, in fact, I would say almost every atheist rejects Christianity because it's a very childish thing. It's a very human, childish concept. If I'm suffering, there's pain, why doesn't God take it away? And, you know, the answer to that is free will. If God didn't allow anything bad to happen, that would mean you don't have free will. Even the angels, you know, they don't have free will, but they did. And they chose to rebel. And so now we live under the dominion of the evil one. You know, evil, Christianity, is the only philosophy I've ever come across that explains evil. And if you've ever met somebody evil, actually evil, and I have, sadly, it becomes really weird, you know. It's like, where the hell does this come from, you know? And it doesn't matter whether they were abused or not abused as kids. It's because that's not always the case. Some guys have had like a perfect life, and they're just fucking evil people. There is such a thing as evil. It hates you and it wants to take you out. And Christianity is the best way to be aware of that and, you know, resist it as well. So that's why I'd say it's the most important thing. But, you know, you can look at whatever you want. Look at the history of the Nazis, look at the history of anti-gravity technology, look into who Thomas Townsend Brown was, look into who Thomas Bearden. Thomas Bearden is still alive. He's a retired lieutenant colonel. Look up Thomas Bearden. And if you read what that guy writes about electricity and how the Maxwell equations were changed, then you start to understand why physics today there's gaps in physics. I mean, you know, got all this black matter stuff, and that doesn't make sense. And Thomas Bearden is not the only guy that figured this out, but he explains really well. He's got some texts that explain how electricity works in a way that, like, you know, when you're a kid and they're trying to explain to you electricity, and like, wait, but potential and voltage is the same, and it doesn't make sense. Thomas Bearden explains it in a way that definitely makes sense. And he tells you why. Because the Maxwell equations were truncated, and the guy who truncated the Maxwell equations thought, well, these are kind of like imaginary numbers, they don't really matter, but they do. And you've got to put that stuff back in to really understand what things like the ether is, why the Michael Morse experiment on the Earth's movement didn't quite pan out as it was supposed to, why no one's been able to explain that, why you've got things like so-called black matter, and why relativity theory is not quite correct. You know, there's a bunch of stuff. And there's also another guy he's dead now, and his widow has also passed away, and I don't know, the lawyers have taken all her money or whatever. That she had left me something in her will apparently, but the lawyers are just they are basically saying, oh well, you know, we can only pay you that money if all the other conditions are satisfied, and we can tell you what the other conditions are, and, you know, whatever, fucking lawyers. But if I ever do get any of that money, I will try and make sure that his books are still available, because that was her whole purpose of had a website up, and then the guy that was running the website, I don't know, he just let it go to shit, and he didn't maintain it, and it's down, and I can't get a hold of him, you know, he's avoiding me or whatever. So, but there's a guy called Harold Ashton who wrote really interesting books. One of them is called Physics Without Einstein. It's a brilliant book. I don't know if you can buy it or what, but you should try and get a hold of a copy if you can. Brilliant, brilliant book. History is just not what you think it is. You've been lied to massively, and you're being lied to every day. If you watch TV and you watch movies, you've been lied to every day. So that'll do for my little rant that was supposed to be 10 minutes, and I'm approaching an hour, so I'm going to say goodbye for now.